They say we're loud, opinionated, afraid, telling us to hush, dim our historical light. But darlings, we're the heartbeat, sharp and keen, unveiling the truth behind the silver screen.
History harpies hear us roar. Through the ages we explore. Fashion, film, and TV's lore.
Hi, and welcome to History Harpies.
This is episode 4. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Christine.
And this week we're going to be talking about angry young men of all sorts across decades and in all different forms.
Since last week we talked about female friendships, and now we are taking it to the boys.
Right. So let's start out with us, the girls. How was your week, Christine? How has it been going for you?
My week has been a good one in that this was the last week of the semester and there was a lot of grading, but it finished. And so now I'm getting ready for my next class. But this week is always a nice little break in between classes. So that's been great. How about you, Lauren?
Well, my week has been great because, as you know, last weekend you and I went to a real mall.
A mall.
We live in a place where there is no real mall, and
Sadly.
as Gen Xers, we are mall aficionados.
Mall rats, one might even say.
We are definitely mall rats. We shopped, we ate, we went to the food court. Sadly, I've been on the search for a perfect summer straw bag, and I can't seem to find one, only because the bags do not have closures at the top. And as a clumsy person, and admittedly someone who stops the car randomly
Where things
and quickly
fall out.
where things fall out, I am concerned about what kind of bag I should get. So listeners, if you have a bag recommendation for me, please send it in, post
it in the comments.
on the comments. I am on the prowl for this bag, and
With full closure. Full closure.
Full closure. And also not something that looks like a beach bag.
No. So small in size.
Right.
Not too small.
Not too small.
Just right. This is the unicorn of bags.
It really is. And it's also a bag that, because it is a summer bag, you're really going to only use it for 3 or 4 months. Then you're going to put it away. So it isn't an investment piece unless you are a White Lotus chick or something like that. So again, I really am asking for your advice on what kind of bag to get. And if you have a summer bag, a raffia bag that you love, please share.
And let's hope you get some good responses for that, Lauren.
Yeah, I really hope so.
And find your unicorn bag.
So going from this girly theme of the bags to now a whole bunch of angry men.
Angry men. And boys.
And
perhaps.
boys, yeah.
Perhaps. We're going to start by talking about a show that has gotten an incredible amount of attention very recently, and that is the Netflix series Adolescence, which just debuted on Netflix earlier this spring. Has gotten so much attention, perhaps more attention, Lauren, than was really warranted.
Look, this show, when it came out, my mother called me. I read all of these reviews that said if this were a film, it would have swept the Oscars. This is the most radically new,
thought-provoking
into adolescence and toxic masculinity and the manosphere and all of these ideas that are circulating around public discourse. And so we felt that it was our obligation to watch this film, in part because my mother would have been very angry if I didn't watch it, but also because I felt that we both felt that it bled into many pod themes and other films that we thought about and wanted to discuss.
Absolutely. And something else, I am a devotee of First Wave on Sirius XM. And a DJ one afternoon, he paused and said, "This is the greatest show ever known to man. My wife and I are just absolutely wedded to it. We can't wait to finish the series. It is so important, so socially conscious, so amazing. And certainly, as the mother of sons, as you also are, Lauren, it especially seemed necessary that mothers of sons watch this show.
I have also heard expectant mothers of sons who are now quite fearful after watching this show that their sons will turn out like the character on Adolescence. So it is, in honor of Mother's Day,
Very appropriate.
we will talk
Very
about
appropriate.
this show, which really dives into family dysfunction and the worst fears of parents could possibly have.
The worst fears in that, as the show sketches, if you let your child go on the internet, he will become a murderer. That is pretty much the message of this program. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it, I think we have to call it the gimmick of Adolescence. It's 4 episodes, and each episode is shot in a single take, which a lot of people talk about with this show, that technically it is so impressive. But of course, there are some problems with this. And one of them is we don't always see the same characters. For example, the young boy, Jamie Miller, who is the adolescent of the title, we only see him in 2 of the 4 episodes, each of which focuses on a particular component of this case against him for murder.
Right.
And again, people have been really talking about the technical proficiency, how impressive it is. But to me, this was just one of the many things that, I hate to say it, Lauren, made this one of the worst shows I have ever seen.
Oh no. I don't know if I'd go that far. I do feel like the single shot reliance or the single shot format detracted from a kind of character development that was necessary in this show. And I knew very little about Jamie in the episodes that he was in, and even less about Jamie in the episodes
that he
was not in. And there are Law and Order perps and Vicks that I feel like I know better than Jamie because he was so isolated in many parts of this show.
Including, I would say, Law and Order episodes about child murderers, because of course that has been a favorite of the Law and Order universe. Teenagers who kill, young boys and girls who kill, and
who kill their classmates.
And who kill their classmates. Certainly, we've had school shooting episodes of Law and Order. We've had stalkers, young women who hate their stepmothers, right? All sorts of things. And it is interesting that we feel like we know those characters in basically a 50-minute-long procedural than this 4-episode Netflix series that got such accolades. And one of the things I just wanted to point out before we do get a little bit more into Adolescence is, for our viewers who maybe have never seen this film, Alfred Hitchcock's Rope was really notable at the time because it also depended upon really long takes.
Yes.
Now, in the case of Rope, they were 10-minute long takes. And so Hitchcock had to do all these clever technical things, again, to have the smooth flow. And one of the reasons why Rope worked so well with a kind of same thing as Adolescence is that it was set just in 3 hours, basically, a party at a single apartment over just a few hours. What is unfortunate about Adolescence and our gimmick of the big long takes is that we have, 18 months, right? There's really long passage of time.
And 4 different settings.
And 4 different settings with, again, characters that sometimes we see, characters who go away and we never see them again. And so, as Lauren said, it really does cripple this question of narrative and character development, which is supposed to be so incredibly important in this show in terms of this big question, why does this 13-year-old boy become a killer? But because we have no sense of characterization, we don't know, except for the big kind of monster under the bed, the internet.
The internet. And incel culture, which is alluded to, but not explained in any detail. I also wonder if the question is actually, why does he kill his classroom, and not what is the impact of technology and basically leaving your kid alone in their room with the computer on. I don't know if the question is, why did he murder this girl? Because the series does nothing to try to answer it.
Nothing at all. But that is the thing. I think the series thinks that it has asked and answered that question. And one of all of the attention that it has gotten because of this supposed takedown of the manosphere, of the men's rights movement, of misogyny, it is simply absent in the show. I think we have when you get right down to it, maybe 2 or 3 references to it. There is, in fact, never any actual proof or indication that this boy has been on these sites.
No.
He is accused of doing so. He is called an incel, sorry, spoiler alert, by the young woman that he kills. But we actually don't know that he has visited any of these sites. We don't know that he's an incel. Later, of course, the parents are talking about the amount of time that he has spent on the internet. We have a worker at a store who says something to the father, like he's kind of one of us.
Right.
But even then, that in itself is not proof, right? That this boy, Jamie, has been spending time in the manosphere.
No. The only thing that we know is that Jamie has been on the computer. Jamie has pictures of hot women that he looks at.
And puts on his Instagram
account. And that Jamie at different points has felt belittled by the victim. And he is an outsider in his school, and he and his friends, who we don't get to know very well at all, but that he and his friend group are not part of the in crowd, so to speak.
Yes, which is also the case of the police detective's son.
Right.
Whom we also meet, even though he's a slightly older boy. But he also is bullied. He also is not in the in crowd. Of course, with no suggestion that he would turn to violence.
No.
So again, we don't know why Jamie has chosen to do so.
Right. And the different episodes, the different settings, do not necessarily add any kind of texture to building either the suspense or giving more additional evidence as to why Jamie committed these murders. The show seems to be more interested in the interior monologues that are going on, particularly in the episode with Jamie and the psychiatrist, where she starts to ask him all kinds of questions about his grandfather, attitudes towards women in general, sexual activities, and things that we wonder where they are going, or at least I wondered where they were going.
I need to go off on a little rant here.
Go ahead.
Not to actually sound like an angry protagonist myself. But the episode to me with the psychiatrist, which is the 3rd episode of the series, to me, it was absolutely disturbing and maddening. And in a sense, I almost felt as if that episode could have been written by a men's rights activist. And the reason why I say that is because when we first encounter this psychiatrist, she is bringing Jamie treats, marshmallows to put in his cocoa.
Right.
She is buying him a cocoa. The first part of their conversation, it is very teasing. We might say it's even intimate in the sense that she knows he likes marshmallows in his cocoa, right? The sense of that she is taking care of him. This almost in a sense kind of, I don't want to say flirtatious because that sounds creepy and weird, but almost this, again,
it's a building of trust, or an attempted building of trust that is going to turn.
But the reason why it turns, it's not just that it's not clear, it's just that she herself, right, she begins the conversation, again, in this very intimate, friendly, sort of you can depend upon me emotionally way. I understand you. But by the time we get to the end of the conversation, she has frozen him out.
Yes.
Right? She basically says, my work here is done. I have nothing more to say to you. I'm just here as part of a job. I'm leaving now. You are never going to see me again. This is it. Have a nice life or whatever. While by that point, he is in the position of saying, wait, I want more from you. I need something more from you. I want to talk to you more. And so to me, that is that character, and please, I'm going to continue my rant.
That's okay.
That character is the absolute stereotype of a woman, according to a men's rights activist. That is, she begins with kind of the teasing, the gifts, the flirting. She then reacts emotionally to his own emotions. That is, even though she's a forensic psychiatrist who should be used to dealing with criminals, she can't stand to hear the word fuck. She freaks out. She needs a moment. She starts to cry. She basically can't handle the anger.
She cannot handle his anger.
She cannot handle his anger. Even, again, the swiping thing of cocoa off the table, which is, I hate to say, but not ideal. But in the great annals of anger, it is benign. So we are shown her. She is reacting emotionally in her job. She is crying. Again, she can't handle this. And again, by the end, she has frozen him out. And I will repeat, that entire arc to me, that is the negative stereotype of a woman, according to, again, a men's rights activist. They come on strong. They want you to think that they're on your side. They can't handle emotions. They can't handle your emotions, and they will freeze you out, abandon you, and ghost you. That is basically what we see from that psychiatrist. And again, I was absolutely dumbfounded watching that, because I was like, this is exactly, again, that stereotype. And this is where my rant is almost over. I promise.
Okay.
I promise.
All right.
This is where the gimmick really did a disservice, because I was thinking, what if we had cuts between his meetings with the male psychiatrist that we also know has been speaking to him and her? Is it the case that he's only angry with her because she is a woman? Again, what kind of response, what kind of nuance? What else would we have learned about Jamie and his motivations if we had seen both of those psychiatrists?
Or additional investigations with the other boys, with the more kind of scenic or motivational reasons behind the murder, or what was happening in this group of boys in the days before, things like that, that would have set the table for the context of his community and his tribe. And yeah, sure, if he feels hatred, or if he feels bottled up, or if he feels anger and he's putting it out there, at least we would get a broader context for that, rather than this conversation between this incredibly manipulative psychiatrist and then this increasingly angry Jamie.
And that also, in terms of context, we can also include his father in that, right?
Right.
Because the psychiatrist is obviously, as you said before, she is sort of shopping for these family dynamics of anger. But we don't and we're told in the last episode, we're told by the mother, Amanda, that her husband, Eddie, that he does have a temper. We see it in some ways, right? In some ways we don't.
But we see a very caring, very committed father.
Yes.
Throughout.
Yes.
And even if he has anger, or even if obviously this incident, this terrible tragedy has torn the family apart and he's angry, we see a caring provider and a caring, doting father for both of his children.
Yes.
And someone who wants to be part of the investigation, and somebody who's very, very protective of his son when all these kinds of questions and interrogations occur. So we don't get any sense that the father has acted inappropriately or has not modeled behavior that is a good one.
Well, and we're also told, in addition to that, that Eddie, the father, has explicitly and intentionally broken the cycle of violence. That he was beaten by his own father. He vowed never to do that with his children. And we're told explicitly again, he has kept that vow. He has never raised a hand against his children. As you say, he has been a nurturing parent to both of them, including his daughter, right? There's no sense of favoritism.
No.
The only kind of shade, right, that we are given, and it's pretty weak sauce, is the idea that he wanted his son to be talented at sports and was embarrassed when his son was bad at sports. That's it. That's it.
But nothing that would lead us to believe that this son was neglected or that this son was raised, again, as one of the Law and Order episodes is to be a man and go out and hunt.
Be aggressive.
And kill animals. And that led to a school shooting. That was one Law and Order episode where the father actually was put on trial for the crimes of the son.
I remember that one,
right?
yes.
And there's no indication that this is going on in adolescence.
None. And certainly that was one, you brought up before the idea that expectant mothers are worried about this, right? And of course, this is something that is taken on in the final episode. How is it that they ended up with a daughter who is so kind and understanding, and then a son who ends up being a murderer? And again, there's no clear answer. But I do think that with the father, as with so many things with Jamie, these normal emotions are pathologized in the show. And you brought up before the question of Jamie putting pictures of women in bikinis or whatever on his Instagram account. And certainly that is something that is treated with great suspicion, right in the show.
Right.
The idea also that, yes, any degree of anger on the part of him or his father, that's pathologized as perhaps something absolutely terrible that has eventually led to this terrible crime being committed. And it is absolutely impossible, I think, to get a sense from the show of healthy masculinity.
Right.
There's the only possible model for that is the initial detective, the one whose son is also being bullied at the school. But even then, he's the one who's saying, "Oh, well, you're putting beautiful women on your Instagram, and tell us about that, Jamie."
Right,
as if
which
there's
is
something
very
wrong with it.
different, and to reference another show than The Pit, which has a character that comes into the initial series premiere, and we see him throughout, or at least he weaves in and out of the show, but who is potentially someone who could commit murder, who has made a list of girls he is very, very angry with, and there's even the question later of whether he has committed this horrific mass shooting at a music festival, and it turned out not to be him, but there is a buildup of both a situation at home, the death of his father, and other conditions in this character in The Pit that we don't see in Adolescent. Adolescence is really showing us a pretty functioning family, at least before this tragedy happens, where the parents support the kids and where the kids more or less carry out what are normal teenage or preteen sexual curiosities and behaviors.
And that's why I absolutely think that the fact that the show does not start until the aftermath is a huge disservice. And certainly you and I, again, are both huge fans of Law and Order. But the compression of narrative, right, that happens in Law and Order is just so smart and so useful. And I think that this is such an example of where the aftermath is useless to us without knowing what, because one of the most obvious questions, if Jamie is supposed to be one of our angry young men, were there any indications before that? Did he get in fights at school? Was he hurting cats? All of these, was he doing self-harm? All of these different things.
But there are also, unlike Law and Order, no red herrings either, because of what the show takes place at the point when they are certain it is Jamie and they have evidence that it is Jamie, and there are no other suspects.
True.
So, and the other suspects provide context again of who else could have had beef with this girl, or were there other boys that felt rejected, or were there other things happening in the school that would have led to violence, and we don't know any of that.
We don't. And then when we do have an episode in the school, it was also very difficult to tell what the show was saying about that, because of course we have a bully, right? This bully Fredo, who keeps kind of reappearing. He actually might be in the show more than Jamie is. I'm joking about that, but and that's the thing, that he kind of gets off sort of scot-free, in that he is very clearly bullying other kids. He's doing this terrible thing to the family itself, and it's kind of unclear what take the show has on that. And so it's kind of garden run-of-the-mill bullying. And And also with the fact that the girl is Katie, the victim, that she is a bully. And so does that lead us to some indictment of girls? The show, again, is not interested in that at all.
No. The show is interested in a very singular narrative about internet culture, the manosphere, incel culture, and the kinds of traps that nice young boys can fall into.
With, again, zero actual evidence presented in the show that Jamie himself has fallen into that trap.
Correct.
Correct. Which is actually really surprising to me.
And for all we know, Jamie may have a mental illness. Yeah. He may have some other reason why he committed this crime.
But we don't know.
But we don't know.
We don't know.
And I think we're also really not supposed to care.
I agree. But again, I will just repeat myself. I expected the manosphere to be an overwhelming, kind of looming shadow on the entire through line of this episodes. And it simply wasn't. And I find that to be such a mystery. And if they do a second season, perhaps we'll get more of that, more of this explanation. If they stick to the gimmick, which I hope they won't, then I don't really have any faith in that. But I guess the last question before we move on is, how do we judge him as an angry young man?
It's a good question. And again, one thing I would say is that because this series is not ripped from the headlines, it does itself a disservice by not investigating the causes of anger in young men.
I agree.
And we have so much dialogue about school shooters, about mental health concerns, about boys not showing up to class, of course, about internet culture. There is a wealth of information to dive into. And it isn't examined in any full sense.
And I will go back to my hobby horse that it is also because of the gimmick, right? If we have 10 minutes of people riding in silence in a car, that is 10 minutes where we are not getting that narrative foundation, those reasons, that sort of fuller sense of Jamie and everyone else as a character.
Right.
Boy, those episodes are a real downer, though. So let's talk about something more affirming.
It's hard to watch, and the difficult thing about this show, like Anora, if we go back to our first episode of History Harpies, is this is a universally praised series. And so, on the one hand, it's difficult to tell somebody, I wouldn't necessarily watch it, because it is universally praised, and we want to know why people appreciate the things they appreciate. But on the other hand, it is very frustrating to see something universally praised that is so superficial.
And in both cases, I think it's fair to say that so much of the praise came from not what was actually included in them, but because they were sending messages that people approved of. Sex work is wonderful and positive, and we need to address the manosphere. The fact that neither of the actual products really addressed either of these things in any profound way doesn't really seem to make a difference.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to some earlier films that take on angry young men and perhaps address them in a sense that is more satisfying to us. Maybe or maybe not.
And with perhaps more affirming endings, which I admit I still want to see in my art.
Okay.
Most of the time, at least.
Okay. So we decided to talk about the film 8 Mile, which comes out in 2002, starring an Eminem at the prime of his career. Prime as a musician. This is his first acting foray, his debut.
And his last.
Directed by Curtis Hanson, also at the pinnacle of his career. So we decided to think about anger and young men, and also themes of poverty and themes of frustration and themes of race that are running throughout this film.
So this is, as people may know, this is very much a film about Eminem's own life. and ripped from the headlines in that
Right,
sense.
right.
And in effect, he is playing himself, the character of Jimmy, who is known as Rabbit or Bunny Rabbit or B Rabbit, an aspiring rapper in Detroit who participates in rap battles and whose struggle, in a real immediate sense, is that he chokes when he is involved in these rap battles. He lives with his mother, a really fantastic Kim Basinger, and younger sister in a trailer park, actually a pretty terrible looking trailer park, I have to say, and who is trying to get this career going while he also has a regular full-time factory job.
Right. And so the narration is this point of choking through him discovering himself as a rapper, as a friend, as maybe a boyfriend, but also as somebody who can protect his family, who can be there for his mother and his little sister, and who can prove to himself that he can hang with the best of them at this place called the Shelter, which is where these rap battles occur on a weekly basis.
And that actually a tiny detail, but I think one pointing out is that the entirety of the movie basically takes place in about a week.
Right.
Where we have this beginning of him being embarrassed by failing at a rap battle. He meets a young woman called Alex, played by Brittany Murphy, R.I.P.
It feels like everyone in our episodes is no longer with us.
Except for Meg Ryan,
Right.
who is, we are pleased, who is still with us. And so then we have a kind of climax at the end of another rap battle, which, and I read, and I think this is really true, the ending rap battle is pretty much staged as kind of like a championship football game, right? There's a sense very much of victory and triumph.
It is an homage to Rocky. And this is why I think that Mr. T, who appears in Rocky 3 as Clubber Lang, should have had a cameo in 8 Mile. It is very much a Rocky moment, and especially when B Rabbit and what is his name, T-Doc or whatever.
Papa Doc.
Papa Doc. The guy who he's battling against at the end are staring at each other and they're sweaty.
Face to face.
And they're in tank tops. And it really does conjure images from the Rocky series. And so, again, I thought about it and I also wondered if Eminem was going to then run around Detroit,
find himself in Philadelphia,
find himself on the steps of some Detroit adjacent art museum, which doesn't happen, but nonetheless, it is very much a sports metaphor, a dueling metaphor of these two kind of towering individuals that are trying to dominate their turf.
And very much the sense that the next step is this incredible success and stardom, right?
Yes.
And this is exactly the point, that even though this is not a rags to riches film in any way, the rags are definitely there, not so much the riches, but this is the idea, right? That he has this very concrete idea about his future as a rapper, that he wants to be a recording artist, that he wants to be a star. And we very much are left with this sense that is his future. By the way, his best friend is actually named Future in the film, played by Mackay Pfeiffer.
He will work harder. He will work harder at the factory. He's gotten more shifts. He might get more studio time.
There's a plan.
There's a plan.
There is a plan. And now he has this kind of boost of confidence. And obviously something else that is so important here. So his anger comes from the fact that his mother is a drunk who doesn't work. He is obviously living in this family of poverty. There's no father, not even one who is mentioned, other than the fact that he is a junior.
Right.
And so he doesn't have a father. The partner, if we can use that word, of his mother is someone who went to high school with him. Right. Again, Michael Shannon, which was such a surprise. That had not even registered. But
he also has to fight his way through everything, very literally. He has to fight his mother's boyfriend. He has to fight against rival...
The rival group, Free World.
Right, the rival
rappers
/ gang, Free World. He has to fight at work, and he has to verbally duel even at a food truck.
Yes, on lunch break.
Every moment of Rabbit's existence is one of conflict. And except perhaps for the few scenes with Brittany Murphy, which are encouraging and flirtatious and calmer, but the anger is real, and you can also see the real volatility in Eminem as he can bust out at any minute. even when the accusations are unfounded, even when his thoughts don't necessarily have any real grounding in reality, but he is he's simmering beneath the surface, even when he's not punching people out.
And even when he is with his friends,
Yes.
right? And very much we have this kind of chosen family sense,
Yes.
right? That he has these 4 very, very close friends, or 5. And of course, the other component here that is so important in the film, and certainly in Eminem's own career, is that he is the minority, right? That he is a white rapper. Almost all of his friends are African American. He is in these African American spaces.
Yes.
And that this is something else that is brought up to him regularly.
And
right?
in the verbal dueling,
Yes.
the substance of most of the rapping is about him being white.
Yes.
Him being an Elvis, him being
Vanilla Ice,
inauthentic, etc. And white trash, basically. So he has to constantly challenge these expectations of what rappers should be, what rappers should look like, and the kinds of backgrounds that they necessarily should come from, which is an irony at the end when, what's his name again, T-Doc?
Papa Doc.
Papa Doc.
It's, after the dictator of Haiti,
Right.
Papa Doc,
Right.
Duvalier.
Right. Is revealed to be a private school graduate. So Eminem has more street cred at the end than Papa Doc. But on the other hand, he knows that throughout his career in this genre and in this industry, of course, based on real life, he will have to continually deal with the charges of his own imposter status.
And that he is an outsider all the time,
Yes.
right? An imposter
Yes.
and an outsider.
Yes.
And so we have, by the way, Papa Doc, of course, is played by Anthony Mackie,
Anthony Mackie.
right? Who is now Captain America.
Right, and has played Martin Luther King, has played, I believe, Tupac Shakur.
Okay.
And has been in many, many other things.
Many things. And this is one of the first things that he was in. And he actually looks like the same age.
He really does.
It's uncanny.
Anthony Mackie does not age. And that was something when I was going back to think about the characters in this film, I really saw the photos and was astonished at how similar he looks to when this film came out.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable.
And so we have these really clearly identifiable sources for his anger, right? The poverty, the fact that he is an outsider, that he is criticized for being an outsider, that he has this terrible relationship with his mother, that his mother is basically useless until she wins money at bingo. And
who wins $3,200 at bingo in Trailer Park 8 Mile? That was curious to me.
And I was also wondering how many months of rent that was. Since she was behind in rent, how many months?
And now she's not going to be evicted because she won the bingo money.
Yeah, I was like, that's not a long-term plan for success.
I also wondered how she met Michael Shannon at bingo if he is the same age as Eminem, or around the same age, went to high school with Eminem and his crew, and what that whole situation looks like of the people who graduated, we don't know, from attended this high school, and now
unclear,
all kind of hang out and drive around and stir up trouble,
start shit,
or don't
get into fights.
Right.
I mean, something else that I have to say, I identify strongly with Eminem, and as a working class person, certainly as a working class person, and not as a rapper, that's for sure. But as a working class person from Maine, obviously not Detroit, but nevertheless, and Maine full of trailer parks, as it is, and I think that one of the things I really, really like about this movie is that, of course, it's so unusual in films to see people working in factories, right? Again, very rare, unless it's like Norma Ray.
Even more rare to see them having sex in factories.
That seemed to me to be a little, I don't know. But then also we see he's someone who's doing shift work. And I have to say, to me, the one thing that it really bothers me in this film, and it shouldn't, but when he's so excited and happy, right, to get these extra shifts, finally get the trust of his supervisor to get these extra shifts. Immediately he's like, well, I'm going to be gone for a couple of hours, and gets, Paul, the other character, to cover for him.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the same dynamic happen in Flashdance? where she is
Oh, you
the
know what?
welder,
Yeah, I don't-
but then she has to go and
don't
do
remember
the
that at
do
all.
the
Yeah.
dance and do the final dance, and that in some way takes away from her shift work as a welder. Listeners, please comment if I'm wrong on this.
yeah, no
but
recollection.
I think this kind of, manual labor, shift work, clocking in and out, getting overtime, and then immediately having an opportunity to perform creatively where someone has to cover for you is kind of a filmic trope.
Fair point. But I just kept thinking, what's going to happen if the supervisor comes back
Right.
and says, "Where's Jimmy?"
But he has
and Paul
gotten-
says, "Well, he went to go do his rap
But
battle."
he got the other character, the gay character,
Yes.
to cover for him.
Nevertheless.
Do we know the name of this gay
Paul.
character? Okay.
Paul.
Okay. Paul.
Paul. Nevertheless, again, I just kept imagining the supervisor comes up to Paul and says, "Where's Jimmy?" And he's like, "Well, he went off. He'll be back later." But of course, that's the thing is, I love the fact that the film ends with him going back
Yes.
to work. I think
Right.
that's such a
He
fantastic
does go back to
detail.
work. And he constantly makes the point to his mother that she does not work.
Yes, he has
And-
to get to work. He doesn't want to be late to work, and that she does not.
And
work.
there are various modes of transportation that are not reliable.
Not
The car she gives
beater
him
car.
is a complete piece of shit and doesn't
It's like
work.
a Chevelle from 1975 or something.
The bus they take is even stops at the wrong places or
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to get to. And then we see that some of the cars that his friends are driving, which look like they're going to break down on the side of the road.
Yes, and that's really fantastic. I think that kind of reality.
Yes.
But that actually does come back, obviously, to the question of class.
Right.
And you mentioned that the sort of secret about Papa Doc is that he went to Cranbrook, a very fancy private school in the Detroit suburbs, and that his name is Clarence, right? That he has a stable family life.
Clarence and his parents.
Clarence and his parents. And they have a really good marriage.
Right.
And that this, of course, absolutely makes Papa Doc the imposter, right? Even though he is, one of the curious things to me is, so he's the leader of this kind of free world gang.
One wonders how he got the cred
How did
to
he get
be
the cred?
leader of the free world as a private school protege.
I was so curious about this
yeah.
because it's obvious that people know that he is Clarence who went to Cranbrook, and and obviously not on like financial aid or something, right? It's not like he's a scholarship kid
it's
from
not like-
downtown Detroit.
No, it's not like they poached him as a football star to come and play and that sort of thing.
He is from that upper middle class world, obviously.
right.
And yes, so I was thinking, how do you get the street cred? But this sense that then we've reversed things, right? Because then he becomes the outsider. And that this is the brilliance of that rap battle.
Right.
That Eminem, Jimmy, Rabbit, whatever, that he is able to turn Papa Doc into the outsider. And he's the person who belongs by doing the whole 313, we're all from Detroit, right? And that this is so important.
I'm the real rep.
I'm the real rep.
But one wonders whether that's just, again, another plot gimmick so that Eminem can win the battle in the end, because he goes first, of course, in the duel. And he puts forward all the accusations that Papa Doc would have thrown at him.
Yes.
And then says, oh, and by the way, right, you're inauthentic and I'm the real thing. And again, it raises all kinds of questions again about the rise of Papa Doc in this, in the real thing, in the free world street gang. But it's very satisfying.
It is very
see
satisfying.
Eminem do his thing and have this really interesting, prolific rap about what it means to be working class and white trash. And my mom is a drunk. And my girlfriend is a slut. And all these other things.
I have a stupid friend who shot himself.
And I have a
Cheddar Bob.
Cheddar Bob, who shot himself. But nonetheless, I'm here. I'm here and I'm going to fight. And to me, that's where, when we think about angry young men or angry men, it pulls from that Rocky mojo of like digging deep, staying strong,
don't give up,
staying alive, don't give up, and coming from nothing, and then realizing that and I think this is where the ending is so germane, is that we don't see him signing some huge record deal, but we see him hanging in there.
Yeah. Going back to work and presumably go to work tomorrow, right? He'll get his demo together, But that's where we really have this connection, don't you think, between the anger and the class? Because it absolutely is positioned not that anger is terrific, right? It's not that the movie is glorifying anger.
No.
But anger is a necessary component in his success. It is a necessary component, and obviously Eminem says this in real life, right? Anger is a necessary component in getting yourself out of that shitty situation, right? That if Jimmy is passive and, again, not getting angry, not even potentially getting into fights, then he is someone who is always going to choke, who is always going to be bullied, who's always going to be made to feel like an outsider. And the anger, that's what I think is, in a sense, so remarkable about the film. The anger is shown, unlike Adolescence, right? It is shown as being something that is this kind of rocket fuel for him.
It is.
In a positive way.
It is. But also, just getting to brewing anger, his anger is directed towards people that we know why he hates them. And when there's gun violence, we know why people are shooting at one another. And it isn't this mystery, this kind of cauldron of suppressed feelings that we don't ever come to understand. It is anger at people for, whether we agree or don't agree, reasons that are legitimate to them.
Yes.
And people who have wronged them, people who are holding a gun at their head, people who are in their face, his mother's boyfriend who is, unkind to her and putting his sister in all kinds of
terrible situations.
So we understand the anger.
We understand, yes. And I think that one of the things I was really thinking about, and then maybe we should start talking about Blackboard Jungle, is it fair to say, and we can't really tackle this right now, but is it fair to say that Curtis Hanson was absolutely one of the most important and talented directors in terms of depicting masculinity? Because I was also thinking about Wonder Boys with Michael Douglas and Tobey Maguire, which again is a wonderful depiction of a different kind of masculinity, right? This university professor and this young student who both have kind of questions and choices about what it means to be a man. And also, of course, LA Confidential, which is one of the most amazing and important films about men.
Yeah.
And, all of the other fantastic things about it aside. And so I was thinking about that. And obviously, again, very, very different kinds of men in different situations, right? Different occupations, different moments, and different time periods. And different genres.
All three of those films are different
Very
genres.
Very different.
Right.
And so I was thinking about that and just how...
Kim Basinger is not in Wonder Boys, correct?
She is not. Okay. She is not. Frances McDormand is the female lead, or
right.
sort of the older female lead.
Right.
Katie Holmes being the younger female lead of Wonder Boys. But I was just thinking about that, what a rich sort of palette Curtis Hanson gave us. And I was trying to think of like other films that he's done.
Where did he go?
I seriously think he did The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which is not the best depiction of masculinity.
No, but an excellent watch.
But an excellent watch. Highly recommended.
And we should do a pod episode of the nanny, the crazy nanny genre.
The crazy nanny. Let's table, put that down. Write that down on the list.
Put a pin in that one. Okay. So we came away from 8 Mile. I will say about 8 Mile though, at the time that I saw it, which I was in the theater, I don't actually think I've watched it since it was in the theater. And now I do think that our conversations about race and class and masculinity have gone in a direction that make some of the dynamics of 8 Mile perhaps feel more dated to me. And especially on the race issue, I think that in part because there was so much public conversation about Eminem, I feel like those dynamics get tired after a while. And that now we do accept a sort of racial fluidity in rap and hip hop, or at least Eminem maybe opened some of these doors.
Well, and that's I think really important. Do we only think that in part because of Eminem's success in the first place?
Yeah.
So
and that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I just think going back to it and having him accused of all of these, imposter syndrome, Elvis, etc., and then to think about all of the artists now who are part of the hip hop universe and have all sorts of racial backgrounds, we wonder whether Eminem really did play this pioneering role in opening doors for them.
That's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of, again, racial diversity
Right,
and angry young men,
right.
let's start
And opening doors.
And opening doors. Let's start talking about Blackboard Jungle.
Okay.
A film from 1955, and many notable things about Blackboard Jungle. One of the earliest films, maybe the earliest American film, with the whole trope of idealistic teacher who goes into a tough classroom. And another notable thing about Blackboard Jungle, before we start breaking it down a little bit, this is the first film to ever include rock music.
Rock and roll.
Bill Haley in the comments, Rock Around the Clock, playing over the credits, which must have blown so many minds in 1955. And Lauren, do you want to tell us a little bit about this film?
Well, so this film, we've now seen many films
Many.
that follow this storyline, which is idealistic teacher goes into a rough and tumble classroom and tries to educate reach them, share their language, and is met with multiple obstacles, and then finally either does or doesn't succeed in doing so. We have, of course, Dangerous Minds. We have the one with what's his name?
Edward James Olmos,
Edward James Olmos. What was that one called?
Was that Stand and Deliver?
Stand and Deliver.
I was going to say Stand By Me, but it's not Stand By Me.
We have that one. We have Mr. Holland's Opus, which is a little different, but nonetheless about lots of teaching challenges. And we could probably...
Teachers with Nick Nolte and Jo Beth Williams.
Right.
One with Morgan Freeman. Anyway.
We could list
so many
of these films, which are inspirational and make us feel very happy at the end when these young minds finally,
at least one, are opened.
Right, finally click.
And one thing also about that genre, which Blackboard Jungle really starts, is that they tend to be presented, right, in which Blackboard Jungle does explicitly, of we are trying to show you, people of America, what is going on in these classrooms, right? This very kind of journalistic almost, uncovering what happens behind the doors of the schoolroom.
You don't realize how bad it is.
You don't realize how bad it is.
Here's how bad it is.
And here's how bad it is.
And Blackboard Jungle is representative of that. The young men in the film who are in the classroom, and the school that Glenn Ford, who plays the main character, who is the teacher, Dadier, the school that he goes to, it's a co-ed school, but he teaches a classroom full of boys. Most of these boys are in a street gang together. They're led by various different characters, various different stereotypes, and also it is racially diverse. And the sort of leader of this class gang, so to speak, is Sidney Poitier, who is Miller.
Another Miller.
Much
like Jamie Miller in Adolescence.
Right, another Miller.
Gregory Miller here.
Gregory Miller, but it's called Miller the whole film.
Yeah.
And is really the North Star of whether or not Dadier will sink or swim in teaching these kids.
Yes, and one of the things Blackboard Jungle to me is one of the best examples of what in general we are thinking about with our podcast, which is that it's a film from 1955.
Yes.
But we have certainly an incredibly racially diverse cast. Right, that the school is racially diverse, the classroom is racially diverse, we have African Americans, we have Latinos, we have Asian boys, we have, again, in this all-male classroom, we have, again, all of these different kinds of kids together. And one of the other things that is so striking about it is that Dadier, as you say, he immediately identifies Sidney Poitier's character as a natural leader.
But he also identifies him as someone of a high intellect.
Yes, exactly.
And there are different levels of ability, of comprehension. Even though these students are supposed to be in the same grade, so to speak, it's clear that some of them are further behind, some of them are further ahead in terms of their own interest in school, but also their own capabilities.
And also something that comes up explicitly, their facility with English.
Right.
This is something else that very clearly comes up with one of the Latino students.
Right.
And that this is one of the things that I think is so surprising about it is that these questions of race and ethnicity are so at the forefront.
They are.
That Dadier tries to teach the students a lesson about toleration, about not using racial slurs. This then becomes weaponized against him.
Right.
Where
By one of the white students.
By one of the white students, where it is reported to the principal that he has been using these racial slurs. And of course, we have this very strong statement from the principal to Dadier that, again, no prejudice will be accepted in the classroom, that all the boys are equal, regardless of color or race or ethnicity. And again, that's something else that I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of, say, our students, a lot of younger people, wouldn't expect that a film from 1955 would take that on so explicitly.
And one of the interesting things, again, historically about that is there are many, many films that came out during the World War II era and then afterwards that were seen to be these message melting pot movies where, yes, we're all different. Yes, we come from different backgrounds, but we can learn to get along. And a lot of the animosity in Blackboard Jungle, racial animosity, class animosity, however you think about it, comes from the students themselves who are calling each other these racial epithets, who are, the first place they jump with their anger is on racial slurs or, again, other insults that are racially motivated.
But there is at the same time also the sense that in their diversity, they are a collective body opposed to Dadier as the authority figure.
Yes.
Right.
That the insiders versus the outsider, and in this case, the insiders are the students who are also a street gang, and the outsiders are authority figures.
Yes, of all kinds.
Of any kind.
Of all kinds. And we also have this teacher who, like Dadier, he's a new teacher. Like Dadier, he is a World War II veteran, right? Something that is said very explicitly.
Right.
And who's a jazz aficionado. And again, he, as well as Dadier, they are trying to find ways to reach these students.
He's a math teacher.
As opposed to the older generation of the teachers at the school who are basically like, you're all barbarians. Right. And we have a case where one of the older, more cynical teachers, he is reprimanded by the principal because he has slapped one of the students.
Right.
And so one of the other really interesting dynamics is that we have not only the anger in the classroom, but also these possibilities of violence, which does come full out in this climactic scene near the end.
And there are multiple scenes of violence. I mean, Dadier is beaten up. His colleague is
almost raped.
Is
in the
school. I was talking about the guy with the jazz record.
Oh, sorry.
And they're both beat up in the alley.
Yes, they are both beat up.
His colleague is almost raped in the very beginning by one of the students. And this sort of assault against teachers and authority figures is something that we see as an everyday occurrence at this school, and something that the teachers are warned about by the students. And sort of the one character says to Dadier, you're in my classroom now, when he's outside of the school.
In the street.
And it's really telling. But again, what's so interesting in comparison to something like Adolescence is to think about the anger of these students and the manifestation of the anger against concrete authority figures being their teachers, not against one another in the same way. Now, they do get angry with one another, and they certainly insult one another, but we don't get the sense that these students are going to shoot one another in a sort of mass shooting or that sort of thing.
No.
Or that they would have stirring, repressed anger, and it would all of a sudden blow up. Their anger is palpable, it's real, and when they do express it towards one another, it's about something very, very concrete.
Yes, and we don't really see severe rifts develop among them until we have this climactic moment where Dadier goes face to face with Artie West, the absolute sort of bad apple who is causing all of the trouble, who including basically terrorizing Dadier's pregnant wife in a way that doesn't really...
Accusing him of adultery.
And while she is, again, pregnant, she has had a miscarriage, something else that is said very, very plainly, that this is a fragile pregnancy for her. And Artie West, again, he is just resolved on ruining Dadier's life.
Harassing his wife, which leads her to go into early labor, and we don't even know by the end of the film if their baby will live.
We do, actually. I hate to correct you on this, but it comes at the very end, and I think one of the reasons why it's important that we see that is not only because it contributes to the happy ending, but also the sense that, again, Dadier is now in the position of being a father, Right. And one of the tiny little things they mention in this film that I think is so important is when they're trying to talk, and you certainly know about this more than I do, but when the teachers are trying to sort of go for an explanation, right? Why are these kids so violent? Why are they so angry?
Right.
And one of the explanations that comes up is, well, when they were younger children, their dads were away at World War II and their moms were in factories.
The moms were the Rosies.
Yes.
And the
dads were away.
Absentee.
And that this is the explanation, right? That this experience of World War II has basically created this kind of poisoned generation. Again, regardless of race and ethnicity, right? It's kind of understood to be a shared experience, right? Whether that's accurate or not, but that this is kind of the kernel of their anger, in addition to poverty of living in what is clearly the Bronx, based upon the novel that the movie is based on. And so we have some kind of glimmer of an explanation for their anger, their hatred of authority.
Right. And so again, I guess I missed the baby. The baby's gonna live. I guess in some ways I thought the ambiguity of the baby was left as well. The wife's okay, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do my job, and we're gonna sort of see what happens. But yes, Dadier is going to be a father. He's going to be the kind of a present father that presumably these kids don't have. And he's going to be a father figure to them. And he is partnered with Miller in the sense that, well, Miller is going to complete his education and Dadier is going to complete his role as a teacher. And that he's also someone who knows how, as an English teacher, knows how to connect to these students in unconventional ways, showing them movies and showing them cartoons and
basically meeting them where they are, right? That this is so much a thing about the Jack and the Beanstalk cartoon that they watch, that he is able to lead them into a conversation that is about their own experiences, right? So again, he's not teaching them Shakespeare, right? He's not doing this, but he in effect is saying, let's talk. And the lesson of that, again, so kind of interesting for 1955, the lesson when they have this conversation is about, well, people are different, right? When you go through the world, you are going to be encountering so many people who are different, and don't make assumptions about people because they are different. In addition to sort of the moral questions about he's a Jack, a thief. And so again, this idea that he is reaching them where they are.
But the other way he's able to reach them is through the Christmas pageant.
Yes, you're right.
And that he's able to connect with them, again, where they are in terms of Miller's singing group, in terms of whatever other talents there may be, kids doing things they enjoy, and him being somebody who can lead them and encourage them outside the classroom. Extracurricular activities save the day, might be the theme of this film. And that he is able, again, to see parts of them that he can't see in the classroom. And so he is meeting them on several different levels that it seems like the other teachers are finally encouraged to do by his leadership or by the impact that he's having with these students.
Yes, and we very much have this kind of Dead Poets Society moment, even though that's obviously a very different kind of school and different kind of students, but where the idea is that, yes, he is inspiring, right, these kind of fatigued, burnt out teachers to adopt their own sort of more, not humane methods, I wouldn't put it that way, right, but yes, the same sense of like, we are going to try to reach these students and understand them as people, rather than just this mass of boys who have been shoved into a classroom against their will. And so we should probably move on to our harps and our loves, but I wonder if, one of our takeaways here is this connection between our angry young men and fathers, right? Because obviously this is a dynamic in adolescence, even though, as we talked about, that father is depicted as being a pretty good father.
That father is the kind of father that the boys in Blackboard Jungle should have had.
Exactly. But then, of course, we have this totally absent, non-existent, non-entity father in 8 Mile. And here, too, we don't have any present fathers at all, right, except for Dadier when he has his own child. But this idea that these fathers have also been absent to some degree.
Right.
And so it's basically fathers are kind of getting a lot of the blame, perhaps, for angry young men.
But it is also interesting, I think, to this trajectory of angry young men who are angry at authority figures, whether traditional authority figures, teachers, police, that sort of thing, to then the 2025 angry young men who are going to kill their own classmates. it's an interesting trajectory to think about.
I agree.
And that the narrative shifts not necessarily to completely relegating juvenile delinquency to the bottom of the barrel, but to now bringing this manosphere and the questions about mental health and the internet and those sorts of things to the top.
And if it is interesting to think about sort of different, let's see, the father in Adolescence being the father of some of our other characters this week, it's also interesting to think, how does Blackboard Jungle look different with the internet?
Yes.
And obviously we can't answer that question.
Right.
But for one thing, they maybe would have heard of jazz before.
Well, I was thinking about what if these, again, the people in 8 Mile had phones. Because there's so much, obviously, the use of music, the idea of this Spotify or those sorts of things, and what it would have done for them, also in their own communications and miscommunications.
Yes.
That there were a lot of them, and we although we do wonder whether Kim Basinger would have won enough bingo money to pay for her Verizon bill.
It also makes me so nervous when she is just waving around all the cash.
Yes.
Right. And again, I'm like, just go to the bank. Put that in the bank right now before someone steals it. Anyway.
Right.
Okay. Well, we should probably move on very quickly to our harps and our loves for the week. Do you have a harp and or a love this week, Lauren?
So this will probably be redundant for those of you who listen to podcasts, but I am loving Diana Ross at the Met Gala. The look is just fantastic. The woman is 81 years old, and again, like Anthony Mackie, seems
Not
to
age.
have zero aging going on. And she is the original Superfly, Superfine, tailored, all the things that Met Gala is meant to embody are in Diana Ross. And when I saw that image of her on the stairs in that amazing gown,
with its train,
just looking as amazing as she always does, and my daughter, of course, said, "Who is Diana Ross?" which was really, really sad. I was just made very happy. So love you, Diana Ross. Love to love you, baby.
She really did look amazing. And I think I will then add just a love because how fantastic Zendaya looked.
Yes.
And of course, Zendaya's look was modeled on Diana Ross in the film Mahogany from the early 70s.
Yeah.
And she just looked, Zendaya always looks
Always looks
absolutely beautiful.
Incredible.
And her stylist is just amazing. And I thought she looked gorgeous and such an interesting little bookend, right? To see Diana Ross looking beautiful at 81, looking as like her fabulous self. But then Zendaya, obviously a much younger woman in a different sort of moment, but with that homage to the sort of 1970s era Diana Ross in her all white suit and the floppy hat. And again, the nod to Mahogany. I just thought that was so brilliant. And just she looked amazing. She always looks beautiful.
And I will say that all of the commentary about the joyfulness of the Met Gala is in a really interesting contrast to this podcast. Again, we think of 8 Mile and its contribution to hip hop and Black culture, and that the Met Gala is moving on these themes and moving on a lot of these early references, none of which have to do with anger.
That's true. Unless it's the anger that people online express about really bad outfits at the Met Gala.
There is
Perhaps that is as close as we get.
Missing tables or missing designers or people who didn't contribute in the ways that maybe some of our listeners would have liked them to. Not enough people dressed by YSL or Gucci or other brands.
But of course, what is the big difference, right, is also that question of class. We talked this week about a lot of poor people, basically lower working class, lower class people, and that is not the Met Gala, shall we say?
That is not unless it's simulated.
Yes. Well, yes, and let's not. That's a sore point on my part, but we can talk about that some other time. Okay. Well, I think that's all the time that we have.
We do have some book recommendations.
Oh, I forgot about our book recommendations.
I forgot about The Living Baby, and you forgot about book recommendations. Okay, so to wrap it up, my book recommendation for this week is actually a biography of George Wallace, one of
Interesting choice.
the angriest politicians around. It's called The Politics of Rage, written by wonderful historian Dan Carter, which really gets into the heart of the anger of a lot of working class white men who felt racial antagonism, class antagonism, and a kind of crystallizing political conservatism that led them to embrace and champion the messaging of George Wallace, which eventually went on to become co-opted by Richard Nixon. And so again, this is The Politics of Rage. It's a wonderful biography, and when I think of anger, I think of George Wallace.
Who can disagree? Well, my book recommendation, it's a very different kind of book. It's a book called Boys Adrift by Dr. Leonard Sax, as in the saxophone, S-A-X.
Right.
And this is a study of why teenage boys, college-age boys, and older, why it is that they, in effect, have become affected by, say, ADHD, by video game use, and why they have so much more trouble kind of adjusting to life and, in effect, adulting, as the Zoomers would say. And it's a really interesting book. It was a little bit controversial in that one of the things that he recommends is single-sex education for boys as something that is really helpful in terms of building sort of careers, sort of healthy self-esteem. And regardless of how one feels about that, it's a really interesting read about masculinity, about boys' anger, and about what it even means to be a boy and a young man. So that's my recommendation.
Right. Well, thanks. Well, I think we've covered the theme of anger for this episode. And if Christine and I are very angry now, I think we'll have to go have a cocktail and roll it back a little bit. But until next week, we will see you, and Harpies out.